All
For
right.
the record, that's why I'm here. I wanted to make the recording, Dave. So that
There you
was, I mean,
go.
I
Got
binged it
it.
all, but I couldn't see myself last time. So
Perfect. All right. So we have the recording going, and this is our MICIP open forum number 9. And I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and go and just kind of pop over to our dashboard and kind of go over where we are and where we've been so far. So share my screen here. All right. Did I share the correct screen? Are we looking at my dashboard? All right. So just wanted to point out for anybody that either is watching remotely or that hasn't been here before, we do have all of our topics that have been covered in the last 9 sessions are listed here. And so it does talk about the main topics, and there's also a video link to each of the sessions. And all of the topics that are covered here are bookmarked in the video links. So if there's something that you see there that you really want to jump right to, you can go to the video and jump to that specific section. And what we've been doing is we've been working through a mock school with a mock data set. So if anybody wants to see the data set that we've been working on, the mock data set is there, and all of our data discovery and that sort of thing is linked in the document. And then down below, we just have our giant running list of all the notes and email communications and everything else that we've been using to kind of stay up to date on all the changes that have been going on. So last time we got all the way through, we started from scratch way back in November, and we've gotten all the way through to the part where we are ready to add a strategy. And so I wanted to share, before we get into MICIP and I kind of show how that works, I wanted to talk about a couple of resources there. And so I have them linked under our 3.2 updates. If somebody has this open, could you throw that in chat? Just the link to our open forum calendar into the chat, please. So there's 2 items that you will at least want to be aware of. I don't think that every single person or even every single district necessarily needs access to MiStrategyBank. But I'd like you to at least understand how it works. So I'm going to show you what it looks like inside MiStrategyBank, and that way it'll kind of help you understand if you want to get access, what you would need to do to get that access. So to add your strategies to MICIP, we will be using the Strategy Bank to do that. So we're going to talk about that process, but I wanted to just share these 2 resources so you know how to request access to the Strategy Bank, and then also how you could add your own strategies. Now, there are many organizations and people around the state that are already adding all kinds of research-based strategies to the Strategy Bank. So it might not be necessary at all for you to have your own account and add your own strategies. Also, many of the ISDs, including the Muskegon ISD, are starting the process of adding strategies as well. So there might already be the strategy that you need in the Strategy Bank. But if you, after kind of looking through what we did today and digging through strategies when it comes time to work on this in MICIP, if you're not finding the strategies that you need, you can request access to the Strategy Bank, and you can have the capability of adding your own strategies. So I want to show in MICIP kind of where this is, and I want to get us all up to speed to where we are in our process. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to pull over the training site, and I'm going to go all the way back to the start so everybody can kind of get the feel for how much work we've put into it so far. So again, this is the training site. If you get into the training site to play around with it, just know that it deletes everything at midnight of every night. So don't put in a bunch of work and expect that you can come back the next day and keep doing it. So they need to keep it nice and cleaned up. So here's our data story, which is our MASD open forum. And our work has been around, we made a goal that was specific to looking at student mental health. And so we have all of our data set uploaded here. We have MiFi data here. We have school climate surveys from the family and students. We have the SRSS and the tiered fidelity inventory. And we went through and at one point, kind of demonstrating a little bit of the nonlinear fashion of the way that the system works. We completed a fishbone diagram around our SEL services that were going on at the time. And so we came back in and we put that fishbone in as a data piece. Then we completed all of the data story, which was our initial data, the initiative inventory. We completed our whole data story. We went on to analyze, and we completed the fishbone first, went back and plugged the fishbone in, and then came back to do the root cause. And this time we did the 5 why analysis. And it actually just took us 4 whys to get to where we wanted to stop. We basically, at this point, we realized that we need to help to educate our staff and help them understand what, how the connection between academic success and social emotional learning is connected. So we went on to define our challenge statement, which was the district will provide resources to establish the mindset and district culture around the connection between social emotional learning and academic success. And from there, we defined a goal, which after reviewing that with Jennifer Nelson, I think we could probably have a better goal, but this is the one that we have in there for right now. So we talked about a goal that used the TFI scores as a way to kind of, we were using that. It doesn't really measure the understanding between social emotional learning and academic success. So please look beyond the fact that this was maybe not the best goal ever and just our practice goal. So from there, we defined our evaluation impact measures, which were our end targets. And so we wanted to see a 15% increase on our tiered fidelity inventory. And then we added a qualitative interim target, which was to better understand the school climate survey results by making a focus group of students to look more deeply at the results of the, to better understand the school climate survey. And we also experimented with the task feature under interim targets, where we set up some back to school PD and we assigned it to somebody at our fake district. So that is sort of all of the work that we've done so far. So that's kind of our whole 8 previous sessions has led up to this point right now. So I'm going to pause just for 1 second and see if anybody that has kind of participated in this process so far wanted to add anything to that or talk about the process at all so far, or if anybody had any questions about what's been shared so far. And this is me practicing my Zoom wait time. I'm really good at it. Ben or Terry, anything that you, after seeing kind of what we worked through so far, any questions that you might have for the group or anything that you'd like to add?
Yeah, I think so. I'd like to add the fact that I have not seen a data set that uses only locally sourced data. And so, so that was impressive. And also when you were in the interim target measures, I noticed that you have an attachment of a survey that's in there. Is it a real survey or is it just a something mock for this?
Yeah, so all of the data in the data set is real data that Jennifer Nelson and I put together, mostly Jennifer. And so we took data from a variety of districts. So it's not just one district's data and from different years and things like that. But we put together a realistic data set. And then, so in that interim target, I'll just share my screen again here. When you are in the interim target, you can go back and you can select which of your, and Terry, obviously you know this, but just for everybody else, you can select which data source that interim target relates to. So these 8 data sources were the different data sources that we had uploaded earlier in our process. And so we selected the interim target that we wanted to see increase on that. And so we wanted to better understand the student climate survey results through that focus group conversation. And so we can actually see that data piece that we had talked about earlier. So that just kind of a really nice feature of those, both the interim targets and the end targets, is that you can link out. So we talked about the tiered fidelity inventory here. And when we click that, then we can actually see what were our current results on the tiered fidelity inventory. So those are just a couple of ways that we were using that data. So whenever you establish either an end target or an interim target, it does attach to the data. When you're making the interim targets, if you make a task, it does not attach to data. So that's why you see data objects on these two, but not on the task. The task is just something to complete.
The task is kind of a to-do list, type of thing. So you wouldn't have it. The other thing is, for those who are ISDs on the call today, the question I get a lot, and Ben actually too, sorry, Ben, I know you're here, is do I have to be part of the data hub to use this data, or do I have to use the data from my school data? Does it have to be, or can I do it all upload? And this is a great example of that. So wonderful.
David, I wanted to share something too. We've been spending some time on this, like 2-hour sessions, and using multiple sources of data to start the work. Yesterday we got to the first goal, almost to the end of it, and I still am trying to wrap my head around the buildings. Up until this point where we developed the goal, the buildings are not in yet. So I'm looking forward to see the strategy work today when we start tagging the buildings with the strategies and getting the principals involved. We have principals involved in the work that we're doing on the district committee, but I'm talking about their individual buildings. Yep. And what do they need to put together. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to tweak the template that was shared, and I checked with Ben earlier on that, and Teresa, and we're trying to emulate the same thing at the building level, but on the template instead of the platform.
So that is a perfect segue. Now that we're all caught up, and it sounds like you guys are at Dearborn are in about the same location as we are with our open forum. So the next part of this, and this is where we're going to be able to start to think about individual buildings or groups of buildings, is when we get into this select strategies area. So we're now venturing into uncharted territory for the open forum. So I'm going to go ahead and go to select strategies. And as you can see up at the top, it does, it continues to lay out our challenge statement and the measurable goal that we're working on. And this is where we get to the add strategy portion. And you'll see when we click that it is telling us that we're looking in the strategy bank right now. And there are two different ways that you can select a strategy. If you have an idea of what you're looking for, you can search for it. And you can also browse by strategies. And when you do that, it will pull up those three areas that we've talked about through this whole process: the academic, systems, and non-academic data. And for ours, we know that ours is an SEL related goal. And so I'm going to go to non-academic. And I knew that for ours, we were looking at social emotional learning. So I'm just going to go to that category. And what this does is it will list out some different categories that whoever put these strategies in associated with this area. And so I'm seeing that, interestingly enough, Great Lakes Stewardship Initiative is on there, but also the MTSS PBIS for behavior. And I'm not sure why that's listing twice, but I see that in there twice, and I see paths. So what would happen is if you were browsing these, so let's say that you went into it and you had no idea what strategy you wanted and you were just kind of browsing, you can click on the specific strategy and it will give you more information. So what is a strategy all about? What's the detailed description? There are several pieces in here about the ESSA level. And so that is a little bit beyond what I want to go into today, but these are different pieces with that strategies can have certain levels associated with them. It says who curated this, and when it was published. So you can see just a variety of different pieces here. It'll also link out to resources. So some of these got pulled over from other areas. Some of them were entered by maybe ISDs or those sorts of things. And instead of going back and searching for a bunch of other strategies, for right now, I want to just go ahead and insert this strategy. I'm going to say that our team came in here and we looked, or maybe we knew ahead of time that this was going to be the strategy that we wanted. And so I came in, went to browse strategies, non-academic, and I went to our social emotional learning, and we decided that we wanted one of our strategies to be MTSS PBIS for behavior. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add that strategy. Here in a minute, I'm going to show you what to do if you get in here and you're digging around and you can't find the strategy that you would like to find. But for now, we'll say that we found the one we wanted. I'm going to go ahead and add that strategy for consideration. So at this point, you could go and we could add multiple more strategies as well. But I'm going to kind of pause there, and I'm going to hit this plus sign. And Amy Henry, I've been waiting for this moment for you to be here for this. It pulls up and we have the hexagon tool. And for those of you that have worked with implementation science or the National Implementation Research Network, NERN, this will probably look familiar. And what's built in is, instead of just saying, yeah, let's go ahead and try that strategy, that sounds great, it actually pops up and gives you the opportunity to work through the hexagon tool. And so it talks about, on one part, the evidence, usability, and supports, as well as the capacity, fit, and need. And if you're familiar with the hexagon tool and you know how to work through this, so for example, our ISD uses has the hexagon tool as part of its decision-making process. And so we're somewhat familiar with the hexagon tool as an organization, and we've used it before. And maybe we have our own process for how to work through that. You can actually just go through and you can give yourself the rating. You could work with your team and give yourself the rating here. If you're not as familiar with the tool, you can actually click on the different hexagon slices, and it will open up with some guiding questions that will help you then, that you could work through with your team to say, okay, so then based off of this, how do we rate ourselves as an evidence? And that's why when you add the strategy, it says to add it for consideration. And so you might add 2 or 3 different strategies here, do the hexagon tool on all of them, and realize that you just kind of wanted to move forward with the one that you felt was the best, from selection based off of the criteria and the hexagon tool. So I'm going to pause for a second and just see if Amy, or not to put you on the spot, if Amy wanted to add anything about that, or if anybody else wanted to add anything at this point.
I'll just say that I'm super excited to see that embedded, just because it's one of the best tools that we have to help us with selection and adoption and deselection practices. So when you have something in place and you want to look at it to say, is it still relevant for our context? It's a really nice tool for deselection as well. So we're not just throwing things out. Yeah, you explained it well, Dave. We can compare initiatives, we can compare programs, you can use it for all of those things. It's a beautiful tool.
Dave, the only other thing I would add is that another support that NERN has. So you clicked on one of those pieces and it had 3 questions. And it's like, okay, so how do I know what that, how do I know what 1 to 5 means? So yes, so you've got some places where you can click and it actually gives you a statement for each one of those numbers 1 to 5. So that I just wanted to point that out as an additional resource if you were kind of struggling to identify where you are on a continuum.
Thanks, Ben. And is it my understanding that that we actually worked with NERN on this to help develop it for MICIP specifically?
Not this one. I mean, they certainly looked at it when they were giving us feedback for MICIP, but the one that you're referring to is probably our evaluation tool.
Okay. Yep. I knew there was something in here with something like that that they had done some development for us.
Well, and the other they did is that some of the tools, if you're really involved in the MTSS and the questions that are here, like around the data story, and then here in the Hexagon tool, they took the MTSS questions as the base, but then pared it down so that it would be specific to any, be general enough so that it could apply to any district. So you're right, Dave, they did help us with that too.
Great. So for right now, just for the purposes of our demonstration today, I'm not going to have our team get into breakout rooms and kind of work through this process right now, because I do want to show you a little bit about what the strategy bank looks like on the other side. So for right now, I'm going to say that we went through and we did some rating, and we thought that you know, the evidence was pretty strong in this, but we thought it was really usable and supportive. That it fit, that there was a good fit for us, that we had a need for it. And, you know, we're a little bit low on the capacity, but maybe that's something that we could kind of work on. So,
Dave, just a question on the process. Is there a preferred order in terms of?
yeah, that's a pretty great question. I know that when we did this and kind of developed some internal work on this, I think that we did end up putting them in order. Amy, maybe you could address that.
Of approaching those? I mean,
Oh, John, did you catch that? I think we glitched out a little bit there. Did you catch my response?
it says I'm unstable, which is not surprising. I heard you say we did put it in order, then Amy said something, but.
I'm trying to recall if we, I feel like we did, but I could be mistaken there. Amy, what would you say about that?
The big thing that we did was we looked at need first, because we don't want to throw something in that isn't matched to the needs of our students or to our programming, or, you know, our districts. So like when we think about something at the ISD, what is needed, we need to look at our districts to say, what do our districts need? So that was like the main piece that we looked at. And then the other ones, it was a matter of, can we, is it something we can, so like if we don't have capacity, do we have the ability to build that capacity? So we tried to look at things like kind of piecemeal that way, but it was really contextualized based on what we were looking at. But need was the very first one that we needed to make sure that we had in place. Research was big. You know, we want to make sure there's research and evidence to say that this is going to actually work based on our needs. So I mean, there are certain things that you can kind of start working around with, but I would say need was the only one that we put right at the top. Does anybody remember it differently? I know we've got a couple others that were there.
Yeah, I do remember that need one coming up first, especially when we work through a couple of the examples. All right, so with that, let's for our demonstration purposes, we would have talked through those pieces, and we're going to go ahead and for now we want to include this strategy in our implementation plan. And so what that will do, again, remember you could have several of these on here for consideration. And when you get to that point of selecting that, it will say that this is one of them that we selected for an implementation plan. And I like the fact that you could leave some of them on here to show that you considered those, but maybe you decided not to have them in your implementation plan. But when we clicked the button down here, it said that we want to have that. You can also remove it from your implementation plan. So, but for now we included that. So the next step is, and then after we—
Dave, can I interrupt? I'm so sorry.
Please.
Jenny just asked if this was a shortened hexagon tool. So the questions for each one of the sections, I know Terry just mentioned that they were shortened possibly. And then Ben mentioned that there's a place where you can possibly click on them and see the questions with each one. I know that was a big selling point for us when we used it. Because they had added some equity questions in there. I don't know. I'm sorry. I got to make my screen bigger because I'm struggling.
Amy, the equity questions exist now in the newest version of the Hexagon tool, and currently, and I just put that in the chat. So that's what this is right now. But we're using the 1.0 version right now. We will.
Oh, okay.
Later. Yeah.
Is that going to be updated to reflect some of those newer questions in the future?
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Okay, we were excited about them before.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks, Terry.
David, I have a question that's a step back from the hexagon tool and the
Sure.
strategy. When we first selected the metrics for our first goal. We selected ELA, for example, and we took NWEA, we took the SAT, and we took about 4 or 5 different graphs to analyze. But then when it came to the goal and we had to select the end target, it will only allow us to use one of them for the end target, not all of the ones we selected, because there's a multiple choice rather than check boxes. I don't know if it's clear, if I can, I took a screenshot, but it doesn't look
Yeah,
like
no,
it.
I know exactly what you're talking about here.
Yeah,
Let me get back to,
and I have mine open too on my MICIP.
yeah, so,
So if you go to the end target for the goal,
yep,
then it's gonna display for you all the metrics you've selected to start with.
yep.
It won't allow you to choose more than one. So how does that work?
Yeah, so what I would say is I think that if you were to select more than one, because when you're selecting that data, you're saying for that data piece, what percent increase or decrease do you want to see? Or, you know, what qualitative change do you want to see about it? And
Mhm.
so let's say that you uploaded 4 items and there were maybe 2 of them that you thought were really important for an end target. Then I would suggest just hitting add measure, and you can add a
Okay,
second end target
okay,
that's
I got
specific
it.
to that one.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, good.
And
I
then,
didn't see the add measure.
yep. So
Okay.
you can have more than one end target. So if you remember back in assist with that objective builder that we all
Yeah,
knew and loved, not so much, right? Um,
yeah.
you could basically just have that one objective, and it was really hard to even get at what you were trying to say with it. And so I think that this is a big improvement, and being able to have multiple measures is also
Okay.
is another big improvement.
Thank you.
Sure thing.
And the other question is the hexagon tool.
Okay.
Um, I know it says your usability, fit, and all of that. Did you, and maybe I missed that. I know if you hover over them, they will tell you what they mean, right? The evidence capacity, usability, and all of that.
Yes. So that's if you come over and actually click on the little triangle, then a new window will pop up that goes into what that means, and then also some questions to consider. And if you need more detail than that, you can, each one has a spot that says learn more.
And
Yeah.
is it supposed to be evaluating a strategy? Can we consider this the program evaluation, or we have to select a different tool for program evaluation?
So Terry, would you mind maybe jumping in and talking a little bit about the program evaluation and the way that it's embedded, either Terry or Ben?
Yeah, the reason I asked that is because in the with Assist, we were either going to do program evaluation or strategy evaluation, either one of them. We were
Right.
selecting.
So the whole point that you're trying to prove, which is a compliance piece, is have we seen any growth? What's been the impact of that? So the program evaluation, the PET, is actually another NERN product in MiCIP, which is in the impact tool. So you will see that when your district has, you feel like you have completed your goal, you've met your end target date. And so then you begin to answer the questions very similar to the hexagon tool about fidelity, capacity, scales, and so forth. So that's there. In the meantime, to show how you are progressing into towards your goal, we also have a part, Dave will get to that when you get into the implementation portfolio, of showing monitoring. And it will give you comparison view of baseline data, the day it went, your end target measure went into your plan, and to the current view of that data, so that you'll be able to show through a narrative, which we haven't built yet, but will, just some 4 questions, again, very similar to the impact tool. Just say, are we progressing in the area we're progressing? Ben, is there anything you want to add? Because you work on this too a lot.
Fahmi, I would just say that the purpose of the hexagon tool right here is just to help you identify. So we have 2 main questions when we talk about strategy. Is it the right one? And can we do it the right way? This tool helps you really identify, can you do it the right way? And if you can't, then so if you were going to rate yourself and most of them were 1s and 2s, it might give you a heads up that you might want to consider something different. So that's the purpose of this particular tool. However, as Terry said, those monitoring and evaluation questions are subsets. There are 4 out of the 6 of these that help you answer whether or not you're making the progress that you need to. And it also helps you then identify down the road, if you're not making the progress, what area might be the area that is preventing you from making the progress that you need. And so that's the purpose of having returning to some of these same questions as part of the monitoring process. But right here, it's only for the purpose of identifying whether or not you are able to implement a strategy. And if, as Dave mentioned earlier, so if capacity is low, it should say, can we do it anyway, as long as at the activity level, we put activities in there that will help us build our capacity.
Exactly. Yep.
Thank you.
And can we go back to end target and interim target measures for just a second? I just wanted to point out that if you select, let's say, a end target measure, just one, which is fine, but you want to use that as an interim target measure, you can do that and then set up your due date to be like every 6 weeks, every 8 weeks, or monthly. And therefore, you will be getting reminders that, hey, everybody on the team, we need to look at that interim target measure. Because if we go out 2 or 3, 4 years on an end target, you want to break them up into regular intervals. So based on your implementation of a particular goal, that will kind of dictate like how far apart you want that interim target to measure. So you could use one measure through your whole goal, but it could be used in different ways. I just thought I'd add that, Dave.
Yep. Thank you. All right. So I want to just, I really want to get to the spot that it starts to address Fatme's question about where and how do we start assigning things to buildings. So we're getting there. So we're going to go ahead to define our strategy implementation. And this is where our first opportunity comes up to do this. And so we're not going to be able to get all the way through this right now. I want to just get started on this because I wanted to get to the spot where we could demo this, and then I want to pop over to the strategy bank. So this is where, if you remember the conversations that we've had around the different accesses that your staff can have. This is one of the accesses as far as who can own different strategies and things like that. So you have to think about, who on your team you want to be able to own certain strategies. So in this case, these are our test users. So I'm going to keep assigning things to Bill Barnes. And so then we have a when will the strategy start? When will it be complete? This is actually going to be where we start at our next meeting. But I just wanted to give a quick overview of this real quick. This is where you can start to select which buildings this applies to. And if this is a district-wide initiative, then you can select all of them. And if you're a district like Dearborn that will have pages and pages of schools here, you can search for the schools to kind of narrow things down. And so you could do something like, this is a secondary initiative. And so you could select multiple schools, and this is where it starts to tag these things to those specific schools, and that you can do some reporting about. So I wanted to just get to this level today to answer Fatme's question about when and how do we start assigning this to school and to individuals. This is our first opportunity to do that. And so this is really going to be where we pick up next time with our walkthrough. So before I head out of this and then go back and talk a little bit more about MiStrategyBank and actually go into MiStrategyBank, was there anything that anybody wanted to talk about in MiCIP before we head out of that and pop over to MiStrategyBank?
I will say, Dave, I like your strategy. Is it your title for your goal? Was at the top of this page? Oh, is your the please don't touch?
Yeah.
I think that's a great.
That was just because it's in the training site. And,
I hear you.
People get in there and look around and do all kinds of stuff. So, yeah, okay. I'm going to go ahead and pop out of MiCIP for right now, and I'm going to head over to the Strategy Bank. And the Strategy Bank uses the same login credentials that everything else does. So when you get federated and those sorts of things, as long as you have access to MiStrategyBank, it will show up on your my login. You can actually just go straight to MiStrategyBank.org and log in with your normal credentials. So once you get an account, which you can do by following this link here, it's very easy to get into the MiStrategyBank. And so when you first get into the Strategy Bank, you're at a dashboard. And I want to, the Strategy Bank is not only about MiCIP. So you'll look at some of these strategies and you'll be like, that's not a strategy, that's an activity. You know, putting a phonics routine in place, that's not a strategy, that's an activity. So this is used for multiple purposes. And so it is used for MiCIP, but it's also used for MyRead, and it's also used for MyWIMS. So it's used for at least those applications. It may be used for others as well. And so when you first get in and look, it looks like there's kind of a lot of things that maybe don't have to do with the strategy level that we're talking about for continuous improvement. The way that you can narrow that down is you can come over here to where it says master list. And if you filter your results by improvement, that when you click the improvement button here, that filters this to strategies that have been deemed to be about school improvement or continuous improvement. These other ones, instructional, parents and families, students, community, those all have to deal with the other applications in the Strategy Bank. So the Strategy Bank is, the way I like to think about it is we're kind of open sourcing. We're using like this open source approach to identify the strategies that are going to be effective for the state. And one of the things about it is that it can be self-cleansing. So if there are strategies that aren't being used and over time or are being abandoned, and on a year-to-year basis, those strategies will start to fall off and just not be included as we move forward. So it does have some kind of self-cleansing pieces to it. Right now, I think until people understand a little bit about how to filter and things like that, it can be a little overwhelming to get into the Strategy Bank. And so I recommend that if you certainly could make your own account and add your own strategies, but it might be nice to just maybe go through your ISD to get strategies added if you're not finding the strategies that you want. Because most of the ISD folks have been through some additional training about how to add the strategies, how to get them tagged correctly for people to find them and things like that. So that's kind of my recommendation for right now. If you want to add strategies, maybe work through your ISD until you're able to get some of your own training about how to add those. But basically, there's currently in MiCIP, there's not a way to look at like strategies that have been adopted or forwarded by your ISD. And I was talking to Lisa Lockman, who's the project lead for the MiStrategyBank, and she said that that's something that's being worked on, is my understanding. That so we could say at our ISD, we could have kind of a curated list, you know, these are the things that we recommend or that we're putting in place. And then in MiCIP, you would have the capability to say, I want to look at my ISD curated or selected or endorsed strategies. That is not currently in place. And so it's a little confusing. If you come in and search by location, you can come in and I could say, oh, I want to see all of the strategies that have been created and endorsed by MAISD. And so we're just getting started on this. So there's one that we've made so far about pupil employability. And so that shows up, but you can't actually search by that in MiCIP. So that's a future feature. And so for right now, you're able to search in MiCIP by those different categories that I showed earlier. So maybe this will make a little bit more sense now if we come in and if we say to add strategy. So you see there's nothing here that says like by ISD or anything like that. So you can either search if you know the name, or you can browse if you know where it is in the cat, or if you're not sure about which category it might go into. And so all of these different ways to sort the different strategies, that all happens when someone makes that in MiStrategyBank. Does that, I know that I'm being a little, I'm trying to like give a general overview, but I guess one, does that make sense so far? Or two, what questions or additions might anybody have?
So just to clarify for me, it's a repository of any strategy that any entity has entered that is searchable by domain or by the name of the strategy, right?
Yes. Very succinct summary. Thank you, Simeon. Let's see. So I'm looking here. I see Fatma had a question. How many strategies per goal? So I would say that there's no set number. And you're able, in MiCIP, you're able to add multiple strategies. It just starts to get to what would be manageable, because you have to imagine it's almost like a tree with roots, right? So if you have in just within one goal, and eventually we'll have multiple goals, but if you have one goal that had, say, 4 strategies, and then each of those strategies maybe had 5 to 10 activities, it starts to get to be a lot to manage. And so it just depends on what's manageable for your organization, would be maybe one way to think about it. And again, I think that using that, the hexagon tool where it talks about capacity, if it's a big lift to try to be able to put that strategy in place and you already have 3 other big strategies going, maybe you don't have the capacity right now to put that one in, but it's one you want to leave in for consideration. So that's maybe another use or another way to think about that NERN tool. All right. So at this point, this was pretty much what I'd hoped to get through today, was to get through the strategy level, adding strategies from the strategy bank, and then to kind of lift the hood a little bit on the strategy bank to show where those strategies come from. And if you're not finding the strategies that you need, what to do about it. So my recommendation is to probably just work through your ISD. They have the logins, they have the training on how to do that. But you're welcome to make your own login and build your own capacity to add strategies as well. So at this point, I'm gonna go ahead and stop sharing and just open it up for roundtable or any other kind of questions or ahas or desired next steps, anything like that. Hey, Joey, I didn't even see you sneak in.
David, can you clarify something? Fatma and I were talking on Monday when we really started digging into this. In the initial data analysis, when you're in that very first step, when you're trying to decide, are you going to be looking at the academic, the social, or non-academic or systems, and you're pulling your data sets, you have to select just one area. We weren't able to look at, like we were looking at learning loss, for example. So we were pulling data sets that looked at, like Fatma mentioned, NWA, we were looking at PSAT, we were looking at all these different academic sets. But then we said, well, we knew there was a social emotional piece that would also fit with this. Possibly something was going on because of the pandemic. We wanted to pull that in, but we realized because it wasn't, like Fatmi mentioned, a checkbox, it was multiple choice, you could only pick one area. So are we doing multiple
Yeah, so are you,
data stories?
I wanna pull up what,
Sorry, I'm thinking that we really were around and around with this, trying to play around with it. And then we realized we have to do a data story for each.
all right, so I'm gonna share my screen again, and I'm gonna come back to what we're talking about, and we'll see if we can kind of work through that a little bit.
Yeah, look, I went back to all our notes from our sessions together to see if I could find anything. And I'm like, okay, this is just not, and I didn't know if we were overthinking it.
So you were here.
Yep.
And were you saying that you wanted to click down on one of these?
Not
Or
on a template. So per se, like create a custom data set, right? So you're starting the process exactly right here.
okay,
So you can only pick one.
right. So here's I'll give my answer, and then let's see how close that matches with Terry and Ben's answer. Okay.
I also wanted to add also, David, that we were able to identify all subjects under academic and potentially create a goal for each one of them, just like we did with the old DIP and the strategic plan as well. And we also identified 2 or 3 under non-academic and maybe 1 or 2 under systems. And we started the draft of those data stories. I know we are up to the end with one of them still, but like Hilda is saying, that we couldn't, for example, set a goal based on different subjects. Each goal will be set based on one subject. That's what we're trying to get to.
Okay. So I'm going to take a crack at this, and with the caveat that I could be completely wrong, and luckily we have a couple of experts on the line with us today. So my initial thought would be to say that let's say that that you were working on English language arts, okay? And but that you're seeing that there are some social emotional or some non-academic pieces of English language arts that kind of fit into that. So I would say that the focus of this is on English language arts, right?
Right.
That does not preclude you or prevent you from pulling in any kind of data set that you want. So when you click ELA here, and you start to build this ELA data story, it's not going to funnel you and prevent you from, in say, My School Data, from connecting to any of the non-academic pieces there or anything like that. So I don't think that just by selecting something here, it's not going to cut off a piece of the tree later that prevent you from having access to something. Because I think when you think to the purpose of MICIP and that we want to be using whole child data, all of our data sets are going to be overlapping with academic and non-academic and systems items. Right. And so to me, this is just, is our goal related to something academic? Is our goal related to something non-academic? And then all of the different data sets are still available to you. So that's my best shot at it. Terry, feel free to.
Well, I think you were spot on. I mean, this is kind of just to begin to organize our thinking, but when looking at a data set, you really want those 3 areas to be present. You want the academic, you want the social, the non, and the systems, because one of the 3 or more could be the reason for not being successful in achieving a goal. So you want to really, and we have found through research that the systems data piece is the one that's usually left out. And it tends to be really important. Dave, if you could go in and so this place right here, you can not go wrong. Wherever you click and whatever title you give it, it is your starting point, but it doesn't prevent you from picking up other strategies from other categories or anything. And Dave, if you could go back to the 5 whys. So if you go to discover up in your navigation bar, and then just go to, data analysis, thank you. And then click on that. And then, so when we go down here, if you scroll to the very bottom, and let's say that you're in a situation where you kind of have an idea of what's really going on with kiddos, right? But you get through your data analysis section and it doesn't quite pinpoint what you need. this is when you have a really good idea that maybe you're missing a data object that you really need. So
Okay.
it's at this point that you click on the bottom that says add more evidence and go back and say, oh, you know what? We didn't look at attendance, or, we didn't pull guidance council, maybe referrals, or we didn't look at, let's say, professional learning and talent management. Oh my goodness, we missed the fact that the teachers were never trained for this. Here's some, what I mean? So it is all about how you put that data set together. And Dave, you absolutely nailed it. It is all about not just one thing. It's about multiple things.
So thank you, Terry and Dave. This is what we've heard before about data analysis and using multiple sources to validate your gaps across multiple measures. But I think the way it's set up, it leads you to select metrics relevant to that subject. Because it's broken by subject, it really gives you the impression that you need to select, for example, ELA. So we selected K through 12 different metrics ELA. So what I hear you say is that go ahead and use non-academic within the ELA. Is that what you're saying?
Yep. So let's say you're looking at social emotional as a non-academic point, which is the example you all are creating in your open forums. But you're going to want to pick an academic goal, right? To say, is that having any impact on, say, a high stake area like math or ELA?
Oh, yeah.
And then you may want to look at a systems goal. It's even, for example, a lot of information comes out of finance. And, and especially when you start doing your initiative inventory as you do your data story, because that tells us whether there's been a good amount of funding sources there. So, so that's, I hope that answers the question. It's not to pigeonhole you, but go ahead, Hilda, sorry.
No, I was gonna say it helps. Thank you. I mean, we wanted to do that. That's, I think, where we struggled, was we wanted to pull all the data sets, knowing that we wanted to get all those areas. And then when we went to go click on it, it kept changing. And we're like, wait, we can't pick more than one. And then we realized, yeah, okay.
It's just a starting point, I think. But the other piece is that every data story works with a particular need. So if you're trying to create multiple data stories, what that says is you're looking at various needs. And so if that's the case, then for every need, you would create that goal, thus helping target that need. And then your portfolio would have multiple goals, right? And can cover a variety of different student needs or strengths for those of you who are look at the more positive end of the work. But
so are we on the right track? Because we have started thinking that we wanted an ELA, we wanted math, we wanted family engagement. So we've selected about 11 or 12 different sets to create data stories on them, and then potentially become goals for the district.
you're asking whether you can manage maybe 11 goals in one portfolio.
And
I would caution you that that's a lot for our first year of trying to learn a platform, but
yeah, I agree with you. And that's why I asked you, because with the old DIP, you took all the school goals and you made them district goals. And with our strategic plan, we were very intentional, and we narrowed it down to 4 focus areas that are really coinciding with this work. That means we did the work right, but we don't want to go to 11 goals, which is really bothering us.
yes, so
Because we saw all of these areas here.
so prioritizing
sorry to interrupt, but I'm going to just pause for a second to wrap up the video portion. If anybody wants to continue talking after that, that's totally fine. But I just wanted to say to everybody that's here, we do always try to end on time, so it's 4:30. So we're going to officially end the official portion. I'm going to stop the video, and then we can continue conversation after that if we'd like to. So I'm just going to go ahead and do that now. And if anybody needs to head out, you are welcome to do so.